first to you, Kathy. October 24th, 1998 was the last time your sister was seen. Where was she? Who saw her? And what happened?
Kristine was at her apartment in Brooklyn, and she was getting ready to leave with the father of her unborn baby. She was 5 months pregnant. So she was actually leaving with him to go see an alleged apartment that he had rented. And then she never returned.
In the realm of criminal prosecution, the importance of a person's motives cannot be overstated. In a murder trial, for example, it's generally difficult to investigate someone who had no clear reason to kill the victim in question. If investigators can understand why a person might have had reason to commit murder, then it can greatly help them move forward in their search. In all stages of the process, the question of why a crime was committed is often just as important as the question of how it was committed. Even so, there are many examples of cases left unsolved, suspects never taken to court in spite of the presence of a clear motive. Kristine Kupka was a 28-year-old philosophy student at Baruch College in Manhattan, New York. To those that knew her, she was fiercely spirited, strong, and passionate. She was opinionated and forthright, but disciplined enough to boast straight A's just 2 months short of the day that would have been her college graduation. A free thinker, she planned to go to law school to focus on women's issues. Above all else, she wanted to be someone who could make a difference in the world. In the spring of 1998, Kristine had been leading a busy life. She supported herself by working as a waitress at Negril, a Jamaican restaurant in Manhattan. She lived in a house in Brooklyn and sublet the extra bedrooms to 5 other tenants who would become her roommates. All the while, she also worked diligently on her studies. Baruch College was also, however, where she would meet Darshanand Rudy Prasad. Rudy was an adjunct chemistry professor who taught Kristine in the spring semester of that year. He was soft-spoken and clean-cut. Kristine confided to a number of close friends that she developed a crush on him. He didn't smoke or drink or eat meat. More than anything, Kristine once told her mother Ellie she found herself attracted to his intelligence. Throughout the semester, Kristine did her best to read him. Rudy came from an esteemed Brahmin family of Guyanese immigrants. He was a devout Hindu, reserved in maintaining formality. On the other hand, Kristine was bold, exactly the opposite when it came to relationships. She flirted with him throughout the semester and the two exchanged phone numbers. It was just after the class's grades had been filed for the semester when Rudy drove to her house and asked her out on a date. She told her mother afterwards that she felt Rudy wanted to have a relationship with her. After having waited months for the opportunity, Kristine seemed enthusiastic about the idea. It was mid-June, just about a month later, when Kristine discovered that she was pregnant. She confided to friends that she and Rudy had slept together just once, on their initial date, and that there was no question that he was the father of her child. Despite the shock, however, Kristine was excited. She was disciplined, on track to graduate in January, and already living in a good house. She called Rudy and asked if they could meet in person, however he said he was busy, so she decided to break the news over the phone. Rudy immediately denied the possibility of his paternity, stating that he had had a partial vasectomy and that the child could not be his. In a subsequent conversation, Rudy retracted the statement. He broke down in tears, begging Kristine to have an abortion. He claimed that his parents would disown him if they found out that he'd had a child out of wedlock, and that his life would be ruined. In the midst of his breakdown came an extremely disruptive confession. Rudy had taken a recent trip out of the country, telling Kristine that he was going on a business trip to Turkey. In fact, this had been an outright lie. He was going on his honeymoon, having recently married a young Brahmin woman by the name of Rochelle. Despite the shock of the revelation, and her trepidation over Rudy's sudden emotional outburst, Kristine was steadfast. She wanted Rudy to be a part of their child's life, but willingly accepted that she could raise the baby as a single mother, feeling more than capable. She assured Rudy that the most she would ask for was financial support down the line if need be, and that she could handle things on her own. Despite being vehemently pro-choice, she wanted the baby and outright refused to have an abortion. As time went by, they led very separate lives. Kristine prepared for motherhood, buying parenting books and baby furniture. Her interactions with Rudy became increasingly negative. She continued to insist on Rudy being a part of their child's life, though he refused to take part. It was in July when Rudy's wife, Rochelle, called Kristine's house after noticing several missed calls from Kristine's phone on Rudy's beeper. Kristine initially insisted that she was just one of his students, but ended up admitting to Rochelle that the two had had a relationship. Rochelle asked Kristine if she was pregnant, and Kristine told her the truth of the situation. Rochelle was explosively angry at her husband, insisting to Kristine that she didn't want him anymore and that she could have him instead. However, Kristine stated that she didn't want him either. The two would go on to communicate more over time, with Rochelle pouring her heart out to Kristine on a number of occasions. Kristine told friends that she felt bad for the woman, and that she'd insisted that she had no intention of hurting their marriage. Throughout the month of July, Kristine had several confidants to whom she vented about her souring relationship with Rudy. She stated on many occasions that she was afraid of him and that she didn't trust him. She became increasingly paranoid and would only meet him in public places, confessing to roommate and former boyfriend Nick Papanikolaou that she feared Rudy would hit her in the stomach or end her pregnancy by other means. When it became clear that their respective positions wouldn't be swayed, Rudy and Kristine began to speak to one another less and less. In October of 1998, Kristine was nearly 5 months pregnant. Around the beginning of the month, unexpectedly, Rudy made a reappearance. He came to the house that Kristine shared with her roommates and explained that his parents had kicked him out, that he was homeless, and that he needed her help. Kristine confided to friends that while she didn't necessarily believe this story, she felt sorry for Rudy and decided to lend him a hand. Uncharacteristically, it was around the same time that Rudy seemed to completely turn around on his previous sentiments. He told Kristine that not only did he want her to have the baby, but also that he wished to be a part of the child's life. It was off-putting, of course, that he'd seemingly been swayed so suddenly, but Kristine was hopeful and seemed to warm up to Rudy once again. Of course, Prasad's sudden change in demeanor was not without incident. Kristine had read a suggestion in a book for expectant single mothers that it was sometimes wise to have the father of the child sign an agreement stating that they may not sue for custody of the child in the future. Kristine explained to her sister Kathy that Rudy had agreed to this and that he had found a lawyer in East New York who would see them at 8 in the morning on a Sunday in early October. Kathy was alarmed, stating that there was no lawyer in New York who would agree to a legal meeting at 8 a.m. on a Sunday, and insisted that Kristine say no. Kristine heeded Kathy's advice and called Rudy, stating that she wanted to bring one of her roommates along to the meeting. When Rudy called back, he canceled, claiming that his car had broken down. Not long after, on October 12th, there was another unusual occurrence. Rudy visited Kristine at her house where the two spent their time making vitamin shakes. Soon after drinking hers, Kristine began to complain of nausea and cramps. Rudy washed her glass himself despite Kristine's roommates claiming that he never did the dishes, and when Kristine repeatedly asked him to take her to the emergency room, Rudy declined. One of Kristine's roommates took her to the emergency room himself, and ultimately Kristine and the baby were unharmed by the incident. 2 weeks later, on October 24th, Rudy arrived at Kristine's house a little past 11 in the morning. The night prior, Kristine informed 22-year-old roommate Uslam that Rudy planned to show her his new apartment. The last voicemail that Kristine had left her sister Kathy also stated this. "I'm going to look at Rudy's new apartment in Queens. I'll call you later this afternoon. See ya." Rudy would maintain that they were just going out casually and that he was taking Kristine shopping at the Queens Center Mall. Uslam buzzed Rudy inside, later remarking that Prasad seemed on edge at the time. Initially, he declined to go upstairs, and upon eventually doing so, paced around with his hands in his pockets. At around 12:30 in the afternoon, Kristine got into Rudy's car, and the two left the house on Westminster Road. This would be the last time any of Kristine's friends or family would ever see her. When she failed to return home later that evening, Kristine's roommate Uslam alerted Kristine's sister Kathy. Kristine's roommate Nick went through mutual acquaintances of Rudy's to determine the approximate address of the Prasad residence. He, Kathy, and Kathy's then-husband Kevin managed to locate the house and showed up with the intention of confronting Rudy. They would be greeted by Rudy's mother, confirming that Prasad did indeed still live with his parents, although he was nowhere to be found. Prasad's mother alerted him of their presence, and Rudy later showed up in the back of a police car, accusing the group of harassment. When questioned about Kristine's whereabouts, Rudy's initial response was, "How should I know?" Kathy Kupka was certain of what had taken place, and she accused Rudy without hesitation, stating, "I know you killed her." Further probing convinced Prasad to explain his side of the story. He insisted that he had first taken Kristine to the Queens Center Mall, before dropping her off at a health food store just a couple of blocks from her house. He claimed that this was his last interaction with Kristine sometime between 3 and 4 p.m. of that day, and that he had not seen or interacted with her since. The morning after Kristine's disappearance, Kathy and her then-husband Kevin bundled up their toddler Marshall and rushed to the police station in the 70th precinct. What they received was a generic response. Because Kristine was an adult of sound mind, a missing persons report could not yet be filed. Kathy was told that it was possible Kristine had gone off on her own, but she knew that her sister would not have done so without telling anyone. It wasn't until 2 days after Kathy's trip to the police station that she was called back for an informational account. Unsurprisingly, Kathy, her family, and Kristine's roommates were in shock. Kathy called her and Kristine's mother, Elaine Bodell, who was a truck driver by trade. Although she was on the road at the time and didn't receive the message until October 31st, Elaine quickly hurried to New York as soon as she'd gotten the news. Rudy was questioned by the police just once, shortly after Kristine's disappearance. He was cooperative, sticking to his original account and maintaining his innocence. However, he did not have an alibi for the period of time during which Kristine went missing, and was described as being somewhat evasive during his questioning. Ultimately, he was not named as an official suspect, quickly hired an attorney, and since then has never again granted another interview. Frustrated with the police department's lack of initiative and feeling they had not taken the case seriously, Kathy Kupka hired a private investigator named Gil Alba. A former employee of the police department himself, Gil agreed with Kathy that Rudy had definitely been involved in Kristine's disappearance. They worked tirelessly in the weeks and months following Kristine's disappearance, helping to organize search parties mainly around abandoned areas in the city where her body may have easily been hidden. Gil questioned the staff at the stores which Rudy had claimed to have taken Kristine to prior to her disappearance, finding that nobody claimed to have seen anyone matching her description on that day. Kathy and Gil gathered as much information on Rudy as they could, going through acquaintances and friends, in an attempt to find someone who knew the truth of what had taken place. Just as importantly as the search effort itself, they worked together to spread word of Kristine's disappearance, and naturally, the circumstances that made Rudy a person of interest. To this day, both Kathy and Gil maintain Rudy Prasad's guilt. The search effort to find Kristine was massive, with billboards and flyers sporting Kristine's face making rounds around the city. A vigil was held for Kristine on November 10th outside the main building of Baruch College, with many attendees who expressed their compassion for the Kupka family as well as their anger for Kristine's disappearance and the injustice that they felt surrounded it. Kathy, Gil, and many more continued their tireless search. However, weeks passed, then months, then years. Seemingly every trail led to a dead end. Rudy had not been named a suspect or even a person of interest in the eyes of the police department, so a warrant could not be obtained, nor could any further hard evidence that implicated him in the disappearance. Early on, Kathy and Gil learned of a man named Kamraj Miraj, a close cousin of Prasad's, who owned a body shop in Queens. They suspected that Miraj may have helped Rudy, theorizing that because it was possible to drive into the shop, it was possible that Rudy could have inconspicuously brought Kristine's body there and hidden it. They also learned that several weeks after Kristine's disappearance, a 4-inch cement floor had been newly poured inside of the garage, which they also suspected could have potentially been used to hide her body. Without the probable cause for a warrant, of course, a search of the garage would be impossible. Several years later in 2010, after the building had come under new ownership, the new owners did agree to allow a search of the premises. While cadaver-sniffing dogs did turn up the presence of remains beneath the concrete, further investigation would find that said remains were that of an animal and not a human. It didn't entirely rule out the possibility that Kristine had been killed at the shop, or that she had been buried there and later relocated, but of course, it was a disappointing discovery. As of now, it's been more than 24 years since Kristine's disappearance. She was a strong individual loved by many, who had a bright future ahead of her. While most agree it's very unlikely that she may still be found alive, many still hold out hope that her remains will someday be recovered, that the circumstances surrounding her death will be brought to light, and that her killer will see justice so that her loved ones may finally find peace.
And imagine trying to keep the cat in. Marshall, who's your favorite auntie? Come here.